What happens when a former president finally says out loud what millions have only been murmuring to each other? Last night, Barack Obama broke his silence on live television, and for a moment, the country seemed to stop breathing. You ever watch something on TV that makes you straighten up before you even know why, like your body senses the impact before your mind catches up? That's exactly what swept across living rooms nationwide the moment Obama looked directly into the camera, offered that unmistakable calm smile, and told viewers that America was now experiencing the fallout of having, in his words, perhaps the least prepared president in modern history. There was no anger in his tone. No dramatic pauses meant to build tension. Just a steady, almost disarmingly calm delivery that somehow made the moment heavier. The event itself was meant to be harmless, a simple conversation about economic recovery, trade, and foreign policy. A safe environment where former presidents could speak in broad terms without stirring up fireworks. It took place in a studio in Atlanta, filled with teachers, nurses, small business owners, everyday people who had lived through months of abrupt federal shifts that changed faster than they could adjust. Obama walked in looking relaxed, navy suit, pale blue tie, that familiar easy stride. Backstage, he chatted with a paramedic from Charlotte who had driven down to hear him speak. "Appreciate what you're doing out there," he said, shaking the man's hand. "You're carrying more than people realize." Inside the studio, the lights softened to that signature television glow. The moderator, a respected journalist from Chicago, welcomed everyone and launched into a conversation that felt steady, predictable. Questions about wages, about global partnerships, about lessons learned over the past decade. Obama answered each with his trademark slow-building clarity, but everything changed when the moderator leaned in just slightly, her expression shifting in a way that signaled a turning point. "Mr. President," she began, "several recent decisions by President Trump have raised concerns, even among his own party. I want to ask you directly, how do you view the leadership we're seeing right now?" The room went still. Obama took a quiet breath, choosing each word with precision. "I think," he said, hands resting lightly on the table, "that we're watching a nation deal with the consequences of having perhaps the least qualified president in our country's modern history." Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the cameras seemed to pause, as if they needed a moment to register what had just happened. The moderator blinked, caught between shock and professionalism. The audience didn't move. Some instinctively leaned forward, eyes widening. Obama kept going, cool, factual, unshaken. "When you look at our relationships abroad, you see allies issuing emergency clarifications because they don't know where we stand. Governors scrambling after federal decisions that reverse by nightfall. And just this week, a military remark that had to be immediately corrected by our own Pentagon. These aren't partisan jabs. These are structural problems." His voice never rose. He didn't blame anyone directly. He simply laid out examples like someone describing the weather, except each one carried a weight that hit hard. In the front row, a school counselor from Jacksonville covered her mouth. Beside her, a retiree from Cleveland slowly lowered his glasses. A college student whispered, barely audible, "He actually said it." The moderator attempted to steer the conversation. "Are you saying," Obama gently lifted a hand, "I'm saying we're in a moment where experience matters. Judgment matters. Consistency matters. And right now, those qualities are missing. No flourish. No punchline, just a plain-spoken truth delivered live to millions, across the country. From Dallas apartments to quiet houses outside Des Moines, families stared at their screens with a mix of disbelief and relief. Some whispered, "Finally." Others just sat, letting the shock settle. Even many Trump supporters found themselves replaying Obama's tone. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't heated. It felt like a warning from someone who didn't want to be giving one, but felt compelled. Back in the studio, Obama finished and folded his hands. The moderator exhaled, fully aware she had just watched a moment that would be replayed again and again. But the real storm didn't begin in that room. It began the instant the clip escaped the studio and landed on phones, TVs, and feeds across the country. People say the internet moves fast, but that night, it moved like it had been waiting. The moment the words dropped, someone in the audience recorded the segment and posted it. Seconds later, a producer released the official clip. Within a minute, it was everywhere: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, group chats between coworkers who barely spoke to each other, and the reactions. They were instant that in a small Milwaukee apartment, 3 roommates watched on a tiny TV balanced on a milk crate. When Obama said the line, one of them, a nursing student named Leah, nearly knocked over her iced tea. Wait, no. Rewind that. Now. Her friend Marcus leaned closer. He didn't sugarcoat it this time. He just said it. In a Houston barbershop, 2 older men watched the clip on a customer's phone. Harold, seated near the counter, let out a slow whistle. I ain't heard him talk like that since his second run, he said. The barber paused mid-fade. Man, look at his face when he says it. He ain't playing. He's tired. Meanwhile, in a Sacramento office break room, a delivery supervisor named Carmen played the clip on her tablet. A few coworkers gathered. One of them laughed nervously. He really said that on TV? Like live live? Live live, Carmen said. No editing. No delay. Her coworker shook his head. That's bold. These weren't political panels or televised debates. These were ordinary people, in ordinary rooms, trying to process what they had just heard. Nobody expected to hear from a former president on a quiet weeknight. But the biggest shockwave didn't come from adults. In a dorm at Arizona State University, 3 freshmen were scrolling through TikTok when the clip suddenly landed on all their For You pages at the exact same moment. Yo, is this real? One of them asked, squinting as he turned up his phone. His roommate laughed. Bro, that's not AI. That's him. That's real. They replayed it again and again. The whole clip was under 20 seconds, yet it was everywhere, wedged between prank videos, music snippets, NBA highlights, standing out like a flare lit in the dark. Then came the reaction videos. Thousands of them, people filming themselves listening to the moment Obama dropped the line, pausing the clip right as he said it. Some gasped. Some burst out laughing in shock. Others just shook their heads, like they'd finally heard someone articulate something they didn't know how to express before. In a grocery store parking lot in Baltimore, a mother named Riley sat in her car watching the clip between loading bags into the trunk. Her teenage son, sitting next to her, asked, "Is he even allowed to say stuff like that?" She answered quietly, "If anybody's allowed, it's him. He earned that." Inside a Manhattan high-rise, a corporate lawyer was cooking dinner with the TV humming in the background. When Obama's voice cut through the room, she froze, turned the heat down, and walked straight to the living room. She replayed the clip twice. Then she called her father in Pennsylvania. "Dad, did you see Obama just now?" "He had. I haven't heard someone say what everyone's been thinking that plainly in years," he told her. What made the moment hit so hard wasn't just the words. It was the tone, calm, controlled, almost surgical. The kind of tone someone uses when they're not arguing, but warning. And because it happened live, it felt unshakably real. No editing. No filters. No denial. Soon reporters began tweeting their reactions, journalists from Boston, Denver, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, everyone chiming in. Some praised Obama for finally speaking directly. Others expressed shock at how bluntly he criticized a sitting president, but even critics admitted the same thing. This wasn't going away. Cable news networks cut into their usual programming. On MSNBC, the anchor repeated the quote 3 times before analysts dove in. On CNN, they played the clip on a loop, dissecting every micro-expression. Even Fox News aired it. Though the panel looked tense as they scrambled to reshape the framing, but the moment that showed just how far the clip had spread happened in a small diner outside Cincinnati. A young waitress named Dana was refilling coffee when a customer at the counter held out his phone. "Have you seen this yet?" She shook her head, so he played the clip. When Obama delivered the line, she stepped back slightly, whispering, "Wow." The customer looked at her. "Doesn't matter who you vote for, you gotta admit, that was something." She nodded slowly. "Yeah. It really was." Everywhere you looked, people were reacting, not to a scandal, not to a meme, but to a single sentence spoken by someone who rarely speaks this directly. This wasn't just another political clip, this was a moment people could feel. But inside the White House, the reaction was nothing like the chatter happening across the rest of the country. While families replayed the clip over dinner, in group chats, during late-night grocery runs, the atmosphere in the White House was the exact opposite. From the Outside, the building looked calm. Inside, tension surged through the hallways like pressure rising in a steel tank. The second Obama said those words, one of Trump's communications aides, Evan, a sharp but perpetually exhausted 30-something from North Carolina, got a text from a producer he knew. "You watching this?" He actually said it. Evan tapped the link that he watched the clip once, then again, then a third time. Each play made the words hit harder. His stomach tightened that he grabbed his tablet and hurried toward the West Wing, slipping past 2 Secret Service agents who barely glanced at him. I and the communications bullpen, 3 staffers were already clustered around a wall-mounted TV. The clip was replaying, closed captions flashing each word. "This is bad," one muttered, another shook his head. It's not even what he said. It's how calm he was. He looked at Evan. "Has the boss seen this?" "Not yet," Evan said quietly. "But he will." 2 doors down, the press secretary, Caroline, was pacing her office. Her assistant held up a tablet to show her the clip. "It's everywhere," he said. "There's no way to bury it under other stories. Not tonight." Caroline snatched the tablet, watched 10 seconds, and immediately lowered her hand. "Oh no," she whispered. "This is the kind of thing that turns into tomorrow's front page no matter what we do." A researcher poked her head in. "We're tracking mentions on Twitter, already over 1 million. It's rising by the second." Caroline pressed her palms against her forehead. "Get legal on standby. Get rapid response drafting. And get me a statement outline we can release before sunrise." Her assistant hesitated. "What tone?" She stopped pacing. "I don't know yet." She swallowed. "Something that doesn't make us look defensive. Something firm, but not panicked." He gave her a look that said he understood how impossible that would be. Meanwhile, on the other side of the West Wing, a senior advisor named Phil was buried in policy memos when he heard someone shout, "Phil! You need to see this." He stepped into the hallway and found 2 interns staring wide-eyed at a screen. They played the clip for him, and his expression didn't shift. Not at first. Phil had been in politics for 2 decades. He'd weathered scandals, gaffes, slip-ups, and misquotes. But this was different. This wasn't a hot mic mistake. It wasn't a clumsy phrase. This was a former president calmly telling the country that the man currently in the job shouldn't be there. Phil let out a sharp breath and headed straight for the Oval Office. That he found Trump at the resolute desk, surrounded by folders, briefings, and 3 phones hooked up to chargers. Trump looked up when Phil entered. "What is it?" Phil swallowed. "Sir, you're going to want to watch this." He held out the tablet. Trump slid on his glasses, glanced at the screen, hit play. Obama appeared. The line dropped. Silence filled the room. Trump's face tightened instantly. His voice shot upward. "He said that on purpose. He's trying to get attention. He wants people to forget everything that went wrong when he was in charge." Phil kept his tone steady. "Sir, it's spreading fast. The clip is everywhere." Trump pushed his chair back and stood. "We need a response. A strong one. Get everyone into the press room. Now." Phil lifted a hand. "The more we respond tonight, the bigger this becomes." Trump shook his head. "No. We're not letting him take the spotlight. Not him. Not tonight." Phil hesitated. Arguing could cost him his job. But jumping in too fast might cost even more. "Sir, with respect, this clip isn't blowing up because it's aggressive. It's blowing up because of how he delivered it. Calm. Controlled. That's harder to counter." Trump stared at him, jaw clenched. "So what? You want me to ignore it?" Phil took a slow breath. "Not ignore. Just wait until morning. Let us shape the response first." A long, taut pause. Trump didn't like it. Phil could see that, but even he sensed the danger of acting too quickly. Finally, he waved Phil away. "Fine. But tomorrow morning, we hit back." Phil nodded and stepped into the hallway. The moment the door shut, he leaned against the wall, releasing a long, heavy breath. Around him, aides moved in quick bursts, whispering, typing furiously. dialing phones. Everyone understood exactly what this felt like. This wasn't a routine controversy. This was a fracture. A small one, but one that could spread if they weren't careful, and every person in that building knew the unspoken truth. Obama had spoken once. If he spoke again, the real damage would begin, but outside the White House, across kitchens, living rooms, break rooms, and parking lots, the meaning of Obama's words was landing in a very different way. While the administration scrambled to contain the fallout, the rest of the country was living through a completely different kind of night. Obama's 20-second clip didn't just spark conversation, that it stirred something deeper. People weren't reacting only to the line, they were reacting to the weight behind it, the release of something that had been building for months. In a diner off Highway 23 near Ann Arbor, a truck driver named Walt sat in a booth with his daughter, Lily, who was home from college for the weekend. She was halfway through a plate of pancakes she'd sworn she didn't want. Walt pulled up the clip on his phone. "Listen to this," he said, holding it between them. Obama's voice filled the booth. Lily froze mid-chew. When the line hit, she looked at her dad. "He actually said that?" "Sure did," Walt replied. "And he didn't even raise his voice." Lily leaned back, thinking. "Do you think he's right?" Walt shrugged. "Doesn't matter if he's right. What matters is why he felt he had to say it now." At the counter, two older women overheard and asked, "Is that the Obama clip?" Walt held out the phone for them. Soon half the diner was gathered around listening, as if it were breaking news. Nearly 300 miles south, in a small Louisville apartment, a young couple, Mark and Janelle, sat on opposite ends of their couch while their baby slept in a nearby bassinet. The TV, muted, was replaying the clip for what felt like the 10th time. Janelle finally spoke. "I never thought I'd see him be this direct." Mark nodded. "Me either. But I get it. Look at the last few months, the sudden changes, the confusing briefings, half the states saying they don't know what's going on." Janelle tugged a blanket around her legs. "Feels like he's tired of watching everything fall apart." Mark gestured toward the screen. "Or tired of pretending everything's normal." Meanwhile, in a Walgreens parking lot in Phoenix, two brothers sat on the hood of their car eating late-night snacks. Both phones buzzed with the same notification. They opened it at the same time. "Damn," the older one said softly. "He just said it." The younger brother replayed it, and he didn't even flinch. "Nope," the older replied. "That's what makes it hit. He wasn't trying to score points. He sounded worried." In a quiet living room outside Pittsburgh, 3 generations of women watched the forum on TV. Grandmother Lorraine sat straight on the edge of her recliner. Her daughter, Denise, folded laundry on the couch. Denise's teenage daughter, Brooklyn, lay on the floor scrolling her phone. When the line came, Lorraine reached for the remote and turned up the volume. "Listen closely," she said. "I heard it, Ma," Denise replied. Brooklyn sat up, pulling her earbuds out. "Why is everyone freaking out about this?" Lorraine didn't take her eyes off the screen. "Because, honey, presidents don't talk about each other like that," Lorraine continued, eyes fixed on the screen. "Not on live TV. Not unless they're trying to tell the public something serious." Brooklyn watched Obama speak again, and this time her expression softened. "He looks tired." Denise folded another towel. "It's not tired," she said quietly. "It's honest." Across the country, in a quiet Tacoma park, a group of friends sat on a bench passing a phone between them. They paused at Obama's face, then at the moderator's stunned stillness, then at the silent audience behind him. One friend murmured, "It feels like everyone in that room knew this was bigger than politics." Another nodded. "Yeah." Nobody smiled. Nobody laughed. Nobody clapped. That tells you everything. Back in Atlanta, just outside the studio where the forum had been filmed, people who'd attended were giving sidewalk interviews. A teacher still wearing her visitor badge told a reporter, "You could feel the air shift when he said it." People didn't breathe. "I swear I heard someone whisper, 'Oh God,' behind me." A man beside her agreed. He didn't sound angry. He sounded disappointed. Like a parent talking to a kid who keeps messing up. Maybe that was what hit home the most. Obama hadn't snapped. He hadn't lectured. He didn't even look surprised by the question. He just spoke plainly, as if softer warnings had stopped being useful. In Miami, a bartender named Ray set down a drying glass and leaned over a customer's phone to watch the clip. He's trying to get people to pay attention, Ray said. Not to him, to what's happening. The customer asked, you think it'll work? Ray shrugged. Depends who's listening. People weren't reacting because the comment was harsh, they were reacting because it felt like a turning point, like someone who'd been quiet long enough had finally decided silence wasn't helping. Parents talked about it over dinner, teenagers whispered about it between classes, postal workers discussed it while sorting envelopes, nurses during late-night rounds, teachers during planning periods, everywhere. From big cities to tiny towns, the same quiet question floated through conversations: what does it mean when someone like Obama finally stops holding back? But while the country tried to interpret his meaning, Obama wasn't done. Not even close to by the next morning, speculation was everywhere. Some people thought he'd retreat again and let the moment echo on its own, others believed he'd double down, but almost nobody expected him to appear again, so soon, and in such an unpolished setting, not at a formal event, not in another carefully structured interview, but in a community center on the south side of Chicago. Speaking directly to everyday people who hadn't even known he was coming. The building wasn't fancy, fluorescent lighting, cinder block walls, folding chairs scattered across a basketball court. A small group of residents had gathered for a scheduled town hall on rising costs and job support. These weren't pundits. They were cashiers, bus drivers, retirees, parents juggling 2 jobs, and then Obama walked in. No entourage. No teleprompter, just him, gray sweater, jeans, hands in his pockets. The room fell silent. A woman in the second row whispered, "That's really him." Obama gave a small wave. "I know this wasn't on the schedule," he said. "But I thought it mattered to speak with folks directly." He didn't wait for applause. He didn't need it. "I know a lot of you saw the clip last night," he continued. "I know it sounded sharper than what I usually say. I want to explain why I said it the way I did." A man in the back raised his hand instantly. "Why now? Why say it like that now?" Obama stepped closer to the front. "Because people are confused," he said. "People are hurting. And when leaders make sudden decisions without clear explanations, folks feel like they're living in a fog." A young mother holding a toddler asked, "Are you trying to start something political?" "No," Obama said firmly. "I'm trying to remind people that leadership has consequences. Every decision being made right now affects real families, yours, mine, everybody's." He folded his arms slightly. "When governors have to scramble because policy changes drop without warning, that creates chaos. When our allies can't understand our stance on basic agreements, that weakens us. When military officials have to correct statements from the president, that creates risk." The room stayed absolutely still. "I didn't say what I said last night to make headlines," Obama went on. "I said it because the stakes are too high for silence." A taxi driver named Miguel raised his hand. "So you're not trying to pick a fight?" Obama shook his head. "Fighting doesn't solve anything. Telling the truth can wake people up." An older woman in a church hat leaned forward. "You sounded tired." Obama chuckled. "I'm not tired. I'm concerned. And sometimes concern doesn't sound like anger, it sounds like this." The room relaxed a bit, people settling into their chairs as if they were finally stepping into a real conversation. Obama spoke again, slower now. "Look, I spent 8 years making decisions that affected millions of people. I know what it feels like to carry that weight, and I also know what it looks like when someone isn't ready for that weight." That line landed heavy. A high school student near the wall raised her hand. "So what should people do?" Obama gave her a gentle smile. "Pay attention. Ask questions. Don't treat confusion like it's normal. When something feels wrong, look for facts, not opinions. And hold your leaders accountable." He paused, "Every single one of them." Then he added, with a small smile, "including me." A soft ripple passed through the crowd, part surprise, part respect, part quiet thinking. But Obama wasn't finished. "I'm not trying to split this country apart," he said. I'm trying to remind people that steady leadership matters. Predictable leadership matters. And right now, too many folks are pretending what we're seeing is just politics. It's not. These choices have real consequences for real people. A father in a UPS uniform lifted his hand. Do you regret saying it? Obama paused before answering, no. It needed to be said plainly, without spin. People deserve honesty, not the sugar-coated version. He walked slowly from one end of the riser to the other. If this country is moving in a direction that puts people at risk, someone has to speak up. And if that someone ends up being me, so be it. But I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing it because silence doesn't help anybody. Heads bobbed gently around the room, absorbing the seriousness of his voice and the grounded examples he gave. No exaggeration, just real life. Obama ended with a line that settled into the room like a gentle but immovable truth. I didn't speak last night as a Democrat, or as a former president. I spoke as a citizen watching something dangerous grow faster than people realize. The room held still. Eventually, a young man murmured, so, what happens now? Obama smiled, though there was a heavier note beneath it. Now people wake up. That's the first step. He stepped off the small platform, shook hands, hugged those who reached for him, and slipped out a side door, like someone delivering a message that couldn't be sent any other way. But while Obama clarified his intention, the country was shifting underfoot in ways that were hard to ignore. By midday, the tone across the nation had changed, not in a sudden, dramatic snap. More like a tide that had been pulling for a long time finally becoming visible. Obama's appearance in Chicago wasn't treated as just another news moment. It became a reference point, something people used to understand, feelings they already had but hadn't been able to put into words. News channels ran split screens, Obama on one side, analysts on the other, trying to keep up with conversations spreading everywhere. Radio hosts ditched their pre-planned topics to take calls from listeners who wanted to talk, less about politics, more about trust, steadiness, responsibility. But the biggest shift showed up in the data. By mid-afternoon, a major polling group released its first numbers since the clip exploded online. They weren't disastrous for the president, but they definitely weren't reassuring. Confidence in federal stability had dropped, approval of recent decisions slid noticeably, support among military families dipped, and among moderates, the people who usually avoid drama, there was a clear rise in worry. One journalist in Washington summarized it simply during a live broadcast: people are reacting less to the content, and more to the way it was said. Meanwhile, inside a San Antonio auto shop, a mechanic named Robbie wiped grease from his hands as the clip played on a customer's tablet. Two co-workers leaned in beside him. Look at all these callers, Robbie said quietly. They're not mad. They're scared. His co-worker nodded. Yeah. Because this isn't about sides anymore. It's about somebody finally saying the truth without yelling. Several states away, in a high school classroom in Omaha, a world history teacher paused her lesson. Anyone see the Obama clip last night? She asked. Hands shot up. One student said, my dad watched it 5 times at breakfast. Another added, my aunt cried when she saw his talk today. She said it reminded her of when he used to speak during rough times. The teacher nodded thoughtfully. Leadership isn't just making choices, it's helping people understand why those choices matter. Later that afternoon, cable networks kept cutting back to the White House briefing room, where reporters were waiting for an official statement. The press secretary walked in clutching a folder, trying to look composed despite the obvious lack of sleep. A reporter asked right away, has the president seen Obama's comments from this morning? She forced a controlled smile. The president is aware of them. Another reporter jumped in. Does the White House believe Obama misrepresented anything? We believe, she said carefully, that former President Obama is entitled to his views. But we disagree with his assessment. Her voice wobbled, barely, but enough, and the press room noticed. Across the country, people watching reacted. Some said she looked trapped, some said she looked exhausted, some said she looked genuinely worried. Which opinion was right didn't matter. What mattered was the shared sense that the administration didn't know how to respond. In a Raleigh grocery store, a cashier named Tamika watched the briefing on a small TV near the service desk. Her co-worker joined her with folded arms. You buy any of that? he asked. Tamika shook her head slowly. I think she's doing her best. But she knows this hit different. In a Denver firehouse, firefighters crowded around a table between calls, replaying Obama's Chicago remarks. They listened to the tone, the weight, the disappointment. One firefighter leaned back. Man, you can tell he's been holding that in for a long time. If someone like him finally says something that's strong, one firefighter said, you gotta wonder what he sees that we don't. The shift that followed wasn't tied to one single moment. That IT came from thousands of tiny recognitions: living rooms, school hallways, office break rooms, back porches, factory floors. Everywhere, people were saying different versions of the same thing. Something feels different today. By late afternoon, news anchors reported a sudden surge in people searching phrases like federal policy reversals, military clarification, and state response to federal changes. Folks weren't just reacting, they were researching, digging, asking questions they hadn't bothered to look into before. And then the next wave hit. Veterans started posting online, teachers followed, nurses, airline staff, retirees, people who normally avoided political talk, began sharing personal stories about how recent disruptions had touched their lives directly. Missed shifts. Last-minute rule changes. Confusing directives from agencies that usually ran seamlessly. One nurse in Columbus wrote a post that exploded across social media. I don't care who you vote for. But after the last few months, I can tell you this: healthcare needs clarity, not chaos. Obama just said what many of us have been whispering. A trucker in Arizona recorded a video. I've driven the same routes for 25 years. I've seen everything. But lately, something's off. When Obama talks like that, you pay attention. People weren't just repeating his words, they were expanding on them, responding from their own lives, letting out the worry, frustration, and guarded hope they'd been carrying quietly. That honesty, spreading from person to person, is what brought the country to a quiet tipping point, because once people start speaking openly, they usually don't stop. But as emotions settled, there was still one final shift coming, one that would seal this moment into the national memory. By evening, the weight of the entire day settled like a thick blanket across the country. Not chaotic, not dramatic, just heavy. People weren't shouting or melting down online. They were thinking, processing, glancing at each other with an unspoken understanding. And beneath all that reflection, one truth rose up. Obama's words reopened a question America had tried to sidestep for years. What does responsible leadership actually look like? That night, a network aired a special segment made entirely of everyday Americans, not pundits or politicians. A school bus driver from Kansas City, a waitress from Tampa, a Portland paramedic, a construction worker from Buffalo, each described how recent confusion at the federal level had touched their daily lives. The bus driver explained how shifting mask rules sparked fights among parents. The waitress said her hours were cut after local funding vanished. The paramedic described adjusting life or death procedures mid-shift because the guidance kept changing. The construction worker talked about international supply delays halting his project for weeks. None of them talked about parties or elections. They talked about pressure, uncertainty, fatigue, and then something else. When Obama said what he said, the waitress explained, it felt like someone finally recognized the stress we've all been carrying. Later that night, Obama appeared again, not in a big studio, but in a short, simple video recorded from his home office. No suit, no tie, just a former president speaking plainly. I know this moment feels tense, he began. I know people are afraid, unsure, wondering what comes next, but hear me clearly, fear doesn't have to lead us. Confusion doesn't have to steer us. That we can still demand clarity, that we can still demand steady leadership, but that starts with paying attention. He folded his hands and leaned forward, as if talking to someone across a dinner table. Leadership isn't about perfection, he said, it's about responsibility. About caring enough to slow down, think, and make choices that protect people, rather than surprise them. He paused, and when our leaders fall short, any leader, we do not stay silent. We speak up. We ask questions. We stay engaged. At a Veterans Hall in St. Louis, former service members watched the message together. A Marine who'd served 2 tours exhaled slowly after it ended. He's right, he said quietly, we can't just sit back and hope things fix themselves. We have to hold everyone accountable. In a Fresno living room, a mother helping her son with homework muted the TV and said, "This is what I want you to understand. When something feels wrong, you don't stay quiet. You speak, even if your voice shakes." Her son asked, "You think he said all that because he was scared?" She shook her head, "No. He said it because he cares." And on a front porch in Richmond, an older man and his neighbor listened through a phone speaker. "He didn't say anything fancy," the neighbor said, "he just spoke the truth." "That's what makes it heavy," the older man replied. "Truth hits hardest when it's simple." As the night deepened, something unexpected began spreading across the nation: letters, real letters, to governors, senators, local officials, school boards, not angry tirades, not partisan talking points, but messages from people exhausted by confusion and tired of pretending everything was fine. And slowly, the country shifted once more, not toward panic, toward awareness. People weren't just reacting to Obama anymore. They were reacting to their own experiences. They were realizing they deserved clearer leadership, steadier communication, and decisions that made sense. They were connecting the dots between national actions and local consequences, and for the first time in a long time, people weren't willing to stay quiet anymore. And in the closing moments of his message, Obama delivered the line that landed the hardest: democracy doesn't survive on silence. It survives on participation, on accountability, on courage. We don't get stronger by pretending problems aren't there. We get stronger by facing them, together. It wasn't fiery. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest, and that honesty drifted into living rooms across the country like a message people didn't realize they'd been waiting to hear. Because deep down, everyone understood the truth: leadership isn't about the loudest voice. It's about the steady one. The clear one. The one that puts responsibility above ego. And whether they agreed with him or not, millions of Americans recognized that Obama had spoken with that kind of clarity. The only question that remained was simple: would people listen? Before you head out, if you want more grounded, human stories that unpack real moments with honesty and depth, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for what comes next.